Yo, what's good, and welcome back to Casual Takes, where today we'll be listing the managers I would like to take over from David Moyes as the West Ham manager in the summer. Um, if you didn't already know, I am a West Ham fan. So anyway, let's just get, and I'm hugely thankful for what he's done for the club in general. But I think it's clear this summer that there needs to be a change. So anyway, let's just get straight into it. Starting at number 30, who I have as Marcelo Bielsa. Now, for those of you that don't know who Marcelo Bielsa is, he was the former Leeds, Lille, Marseille manager, known for his very expansive football and sort of attacking philosophy. He's been credited by the likes of Pep for inspiring his footballing philosophy. So why do I have him all the way down to 30th? Well, one factor is age. Bielsa is already 68. Second is, I think the new West Ham manager needs to be willing to take on a project, and I'm not sure that's for Bielsa. And thirdly, it's recent success. Outside of his spell at Leeds, he hasn't been a overly successful manager overall in terms of league positioning and consistency. Obviously, if his football did come to the London Stadium, I'd be very happy for it to watch it because it's very entertaining and exciting. However, I'm not sure it's the right call for West Ham. And then in 29, we have Jesse Marsh for his notes on what I think. I have just put long, which I think sums it up. He was decent as the coach at New York Red Bulls and at RB Salzburg, but he since then has failed at RB Leipzig and failed at Leeds. And while he says the right things a lot, he doesn't do the right things enough. I'm not convinced he's necessarily a bad manager. I think he's a tier below where West Ham want to be as a club, and he's more suited to maybe a championship role instead. And if we were to replace someone like Moyes with him, I wouldn't be very happy with it. Coming in at 28th spot, I have Javi Gracia. Javi Gracia, who some of you may know as the former Watford coach who took them to an FA Cup final. Once again, like Jesse Marsh, I feel like he's just comfortably a level below where West Ham want to be as a club. He obviously had some success at Watford, and in my opinion, got fairly sacked. But since then, the roles he's taken, like the Valencia job, he's been underwhelming there as well. Then, coming in at 27th, this is the first manager I think we would even consider, and it's Steve Cooper. Now, I'm also against Steve Cooper because in the 1.5 seasons he spent at Forest, in the Premier League, he proved he wasn't a Premier League level coach, in my opinion. He's had a decent squad and lots of backing, but he hasn't really been able to get them any higher than sort of 15th, 16th maybe, and not playing particularly great football either. That being said, why I'm more keen on him than the others is firstly he's young, he's only in his early to mid 40s, and secondly he has had success at both Swansea and Nottingham Forest in the Championship. So he is a proven coach at a certain level. I just don't think that level will be at West Ham. Anyway, at 26th, I have Jose Mourinho. Now, if this was 10 years ago, I think Jose Mourinho wouldn't even be first. He'd be like zero. He'd be like the dream you'd want as a West Ham manager. However, this isn't the same Jose Mourinho we're talking about. This is an older Jose. Sort of lost his spark a little bit. We need a big rebuild as part of the squad. I'm going to probably do a little video on that as well. I don't think Jose is necessarily the man to take West Ham forward. He's too old, he's too stuck in his ways. And a lot of the criticisms of Moyes you can level at Jose. Doesn't integrate the youth, plays overly defensive football. So I think that's why Roma let him go as well. So yeah, not convinced. And then above him in the 25th spot, I have Niko Kovac. Now Kovac is really someone I wouldn't be keen on, but he has had success at mid-table clubs in the past. He did a inconsistent job at Monaco. I feel that is fair to say. And then he's been did a good job at Frankfurt, and then a very inconsistent, poor job at Bayern Munich, even though he won the league, because the standards there are just so much higher. Well, I don't think he's a bad coach. I think his lack of ability to keep a job long term for a project like West Ham building, I don't think it's best suited to us. But I wouldn't necessarily be completely against it. Now, next up in the 24th spot, we've got Philippe Clement, who's the 51-year-old Rangers manager. Again, looking at my notes, he was successful in Belgium and Scotland. So far he's in the title race, but you expect that with Rangers. He is also on a long contract and doesn't look set to win the league, which as a Rangers manager is highly disappointing. He also did a fairly good job at building the foundations at Monaco, but he's I think the failure, or not failure, but disappointment at Rangers has really put me off him. Rangers are a squad that, or they're a team as the second or biggest, whichever way you want to debate it, team in Scotland. They should be competing for league titles. They should be competing in Europe better than I think he's had them competing. So I don't think he'd be my first choice. Now at 23rd, I have Maurizio Sarri. Now, I think Maurizio Sarri is a lot better manager than a lot of managers I've mentioned ahead of him. And maybe 5 years ago, I would have really liked him at West Ham. But he's coming off a very up and down stint in Lazio. He's 65. While I don't think he did a bad job with the Chelsea team in the Premier League, I don't think Premier League football's necessarily suited to his style of the rigid 4-3-3 with a player like Jorginho coming in, the centre-back splitting, full-backs high and wide, and the substitutions. So I wouldn't be unhappy with Sarri, but I think for a long-term project, a 65-year-old is probably too old, which is the same reason I have Peter Bosz at number 22, who's done a solid job at everywhere he's been, as wide range of clubs, most recently PSV, but has also managed to Bayer Leverkusen as well. The reason I'm against him is he's 60. He's never managed in the Premier League, and I think it's a big jump for a 60-year-old. It'd take a lot of commitment. It's going to be very tough to get him out of PSV, probably a bit of money that would eat into our transfer budget, and it's possibly not even a job he'd want to take, because he's got building a very nice thing with that PSV squad. But again, we're now entering into sort of the tier of managers where I'm not for, but I'm not against, and I can sort of see the vision. Whereas the names before Sarri, I didn't really want it at all. Anyway, just above Peter Bosz in 21st, is Russell Martin, I believe. For those of you that don't know, Russell Martin is the manager at Southampton. Who West Ham have a player, Flynn Downs, on loan at Southampton. He plays a very heavily possession-based football, almost in my opinion to the point where it's boring, which is probably why I have him so low, because I think he's a young up-and-coming manager from the Championship. I think he did a good job at MK Dons, he did a decent job at Swansea, he's doing a decent job at Southampton. Again, he's clearly on the right trajectory, but sometimes when I watch Southampton, and especially the Swansea teams play football, sometimes it can be mind-numbing, just so boring at times. At times it can be beautiful, but I'm not sure the fans at the London Stadium, being a fan of the London Stadium myself, would necessarily go for his brand of football. It's not exciting. It's possession, but it's not really possession on the front foot. It's possession for possession's sake. That maybe it doesn't even translate to the Premier League. Maybe it doesn't win games like that. Okay. Then at the 20th spot, I have Andres Villas-Boas. Now, for Andre, he should be a name familiar to a lot of people. Manager at Chelsea, at Tottenham, Porto, and Marseille, and he's had relative success wherever he's been, minus Chelsea and Spurs. I think the reason I have him so low is he's been out of management for 3 years, and in management he's a good manager, good tactical ideas, good motivator. I think him being out of management for 3 years, you sort of see the game pass you by, a bit like it has with Mourinho, a bit like it had with Pellegrini when he came back to the Premier League. You spend time at the game, you lose sort of the mental side of it. So I wouldn't dislike him as a manager. I think he'd be fine, but I'm not sure it's someone you get rid of Moyes. I don't think he's an upgrade necessarily. I don't think some of the names could be upgrades, like maybe Russell Martin, for example, but I don't think any of the names I mentioned so far are necessarily much of an upgrade. Anyway, at number 19, I have Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Now, this one could be controversial. Everyone knows him for his time at United, where it was, I think, in the words of Gattuso, sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe, but with Solskjaer, what you do have is a man that can motivate his players. You can criticize his tactical naiveties at a club like Man United, but those players fought and they played hard for him, and they had a front line that was scoring lots of goals. Martial, Rashford, the other one, they were banging goals, especially under lockdown. He had them playing some nice stuff. Second place finish in the Premier League. Now, would I want him? Not necessarily. I think there's a reason no Premier League clubs come in from in the past 2 years. Partly I don't think he wants another job, and partly because I think a lot of us can identify those tactical naiveties and aren't too keen on him. But as a project manager, because he was building something there at United, I wouldn't be totally opposed to it. Now at number 18, I've got probably the most interesting one yet. We have Michael Carrick. Now Michael Carrick was obviously an assistant manager to Solskjaer at Man United, and then he's taken on his own job at Middlesbrough, where in the first season he brought them into the playoffs, and the second season he's having a very solid mid-table season with whilst losing a lot of his best players from the season before, especially players like Chuba Akpom, who went to Ajax, and I believe Morgan Rogers, who is currently playing very well at Aston Villa. He's a name that I might like to have a little bit more experience, but obviously as a ex-West Ham player as well, he knows the club, he knows the fans, he knows the fans' demands, he plays some nice football, and I think with a bigger budget you could really see him progress. So he'd definitely be a name to consider. I would just like him to have a couple more seasons in the Championship, maybe see if he can get a team promoted, maybe take on an upper Championship team before coming to West Ham. But it's a name that certainly interests me. And then another name is at 17, is Carlos Corberán. He is currently West Brom's manager and has them in 5th place at the playoffs. He's came into West Brom to keep them up last season. He's done that, and then previously at Huddersfield, he came in to keep them up. He did that, and then obviously he had a very impressive sort of run with a very poor Huddersfield team. If you actually go look at the quality of players, to a top 6 place and a playoff final where they narrowly lost to completely slips my mind, but you get the idea. I think he's a quality coach, and I think he's definitely a name that West Ham should be considering, especially if we want to build a project. Because he's young, he fits the age profile. Let me just double check his age. I believe he's in his mid-40s. The only criticism I'd have is he's not yet spent 2 full seasons at a football club, and I feel like if we want a long-term manager, rebuild all of that, you want a manager that's proven he can stay at clubs for long periods of time, which is the only reason I would be against him as of right now. And 16 is Marcelo Gallardo. Now, for those of you that don't know who Marcelo Gallardo is, he's a manager currently managing the Saudi Arabia for, I believe, Al Ittihad, but he was managing South America. In South America, he was the South American version of a Pep Guardiola, a Jose Mourinho. He's fairly young, if I remember correctly. Let me just double check that. Oh yeah, he's only 48, and like I said, multiple league titles in South America, Copa Libertadores, which is the South American version of the Champions League, etc., etc. The only thing I'd have potentially against him is, which is why he's not higher, is I don't like the fact that he's gone to work in Saudi Arabia. I think it shows, obviously money is important, but I think it shows a complete love for money, because he could have got a very decent job in Europe, in Portugal or Spain maybe, but prioritizing the Saudi Arabian money shows a lack of ambition, and I don't think that's something we need at the club necessarily. And then just above Marcelo Gallardo in 15th, I have Brendan Rodgers. If you've watched the Premier League for the last 10 years, you should be very familiar with the name Brendan Rodgers. Managed at Swansea, Liverpool, Leicester. Was successful at all 3 clubs. I think the most impressive stint was Leicester, where he brought 2 back-to-back 5th place finishes and an FA Cup. Also very successful in Scotland, racking up domestic trophies for fun, league titles, league cups, Scottish cups. The only reason I have him so low is because he can be very abrasive and toxic to work with, especially in his time at Leicester. When things go sour from a club, they go sour very quickly. His final season at Leicester, he was awful. Completely lost the dressing room. And I know West Ham fans will say Moyes has lost the dressing room, but it wasn't the same type of losing the dressing room, if that makes sense. Same with Liverpool. When it went bad, it went really bad. So yeah, that's why I'd be against it, because we obviously have that very supportive fans, but very demanding fans, and I'm not sure we'd necessarily mesh with his demanding nature. And then just above him in 14th, I have Rob Edwards. And now we're sort of getting into the people where I could see him replacing Moyes, and I wouldn't be unhappy with it. So I would actively like them to replace Moyes. He's only 41. His 2 full seasons of management, he's had promotions with Forest Green up to League One, and if you've been following Forest Green since then, they were not a League One club at all. They look like they're going back down to the National League, if we're being completely frank, and brought Luton up to the Premier League. Again, a very impressive job. Obviously we all know the stuff about Kenilworth Road, how it's not really a big enough stadium, how Luton don't really have the finances there. it's very impressive to take a club like Luton in the playoffs up to the Premier League. The only criticisms I'd have of bringing him in is lack of experience. He's barely managed 3-4 seasons of full football. He's on a long-term contract with Luton, which would mean a lot of compensation to bring him through, and his football sometimes translates to the Premier League very well. Like, this Luton side have been fairly competitive, but it's a lot of the time not been enough to get them over the line. So it's not a name I'm opposed to, it's a name I'd be interested to hear more about, but he wouldn't be sort of up there like the names I'm getting to next, such as in number 13, Will Still. For those of you that don't know, Will Still is a 31-year-old manager in the French league at Stade Rennes. He's had 2 good seasons where he's consistently lost some of his best players. Like, for the Arsenal fans watching, they'll know that he had following Balogun on loan there. He's now at Monaco. They've lost a couple of other players as well. One sec, let me see if I can get the names up now. But he consistently loses his best players season on season, as a lot of mid-table clubs do, and he's replaced them well, and he's bringing on relatively solid and defensively sound football in France. The 2 criticisms I have of him are, one, lack of experience in English football. English football is a different beast, and a lot of managers can struggle, although he is obviously English, which would help the transition over. And the second is, his teams don't tend to score a lot of goals. They're fairly defensively sound, but they're not exactly prolific, even with Balogun banging in 21-22 goals last season. So I think that'd just be an area, those 2. But if we were going to fully commit to a project, he would be a name I'd be considering. At number 12, we have Julian Lopetegui. He is a 57-year-old Spanish manager, former goalkeeper for both Barcelona and Real Madrid. He had 3 very impressive seasons with Sevilla, from the 1920 season to the 21-22 season, where he won the Europa League and had 3 very good league finishes. He did a decent job bringing Wolves out the relegation battle last season, or if you're watching this later, the 22-23 season. But his football was spoiling at times of criminal lack of goals, especially from the attacking talent that Gary O'Neill, who I'm going to mention later, has managed to bring to the fore with them. And his major mark on his career is failed completely at Real Madrid in 18-19, costing him the role at the Spanish club. And another criticism is he leaves clubs on bad terms a lot. So he was obviously the Spain national team manager just before the World Cup, before he got announced as the future Real Madrid manager, and that completely ruined Spain's World Cup. And then they were leaving him really out in the dark, then completely failed at Real Madrid, got sacked on bad terms. With the Europa League win, even with Sevilla, he got sacked there as well. And then he sort of walked out on Wolves when he didn't think they could give him the necessary financial backing, which I feel like shows a lack of commitment on his part, which is why I don't have him higher, because in terms of resume and a lot of the time style of football, he is right up there. And then just above him in 11, this is a manager I would really like. It is Kieran McKenna. What's that? I'm just trying to find my notes on him. Okay, yep. So Kieran McKenna, a name I'd be very high on. Took a mid-table League One Ipswich side to the verge of automatic promotion in the Championship. It may have happened, it may have not, as of the end of this video. As his first job in management, and if you look at this Ipswich side, it's not a particularly strong squad. They've got some exciting players, like I know Chelsea fans are very high on someone like Amari Hutchinson. Leif Davis has been very impressive, and in the video I'm going to do about West Ham transfers, he's definitely a name I'm going to mention. But the vast majority of that squad was with him when he signed in League One, and could potentially be playing Premier League football in August of 2024. So he'd definitely be a name I'd be looking at. Obviously, he does lack some experience, but he was also assistant manager to Solskjaer at United. So he's definitely a name to look out for. And if West Ham were to go for him in the summer, I think it would be a great move, a great signing, personally. Then, now entering the top 10. In 10th, I have Gary O'Neill. Now, if you watch the Premier League, which you probably do if you watch this video, you'll know just how good Gary O'Neill has been at Wolves this season. A lot of people had this Wolves squad to go down at the start of the season, myself included. We didn't see where the goals were coming from. We didn't see the solidity sort of defensively. But Gary O'Neill got them in mid-table. They might even finish above West Ham this season with an injury crisis going on, losing the likes of Pedro Neto, Cunha for a lot of the season, Huang to the Asian Cup and for a lot of the season. Then you signing Bellegarde for a lot of the season. He's done a very impressive job, and they can normally get stiffed a lot by VAR as well. He also did a very good job at keeping Bournemouth up after former West Ham player, actually, Scott Parker, said that Bournemouth squad was destined to finish bottom, which I think he did a very impressive job there. Also, a former West Ham player knows what it's like to be around the club. He's definitely a name I would be considering and sort of actively going for. At number 9, I have Edin Terzic. For the West Ham fans here, you may know him as Slaven Bilic's former assistant manager when he was at West Ham. He's a German whose sort of main role has been managing or assistant managing Borussia Dortmund for the last 5 years. He's helped develop players such as Bellingham and Haaland, and even someone like Jadon Sancho. So he's not afraid to use the youth, which I think is a good sign. His team Borussia Dortmund currently sit 5th in the Bundesliga, which is slightly disappointing for them. But they have also just progressed to a Champions League semi-final, which is very impressive. I think he's a very capable coach, fairly young, fairly inexperienced though. But I think if Dortmund are looking to part ways with someone like him in the summer, he would be a name I'd be looking at. I wouldn't say someone young, someone who can improve, someone who likes to play more expansive style of football. Solid European experience. I think he'd be a good coach. Then at number 8, I have Marco Silva. Now, for those of you that don't know, Marco Silva is the manager at Fulham currently, about to complete his 3rd season as Fulham coach, and I think everyone can say that his 3 seasons at Fulham have been resounding successes. 1st season got them promoted, 1st in the league, made it look like light work. 2nd season kept them up, never in any real danger. 3rd season, after losing their star striker and Alexander Mitrovic, has kept them up again with no stress of relegation, fairly comfortably. And obviously he's had previous experience in England. He had a so-so season at Everton, not great. 1st season at Everton before it went a bit sour. Had his Watford team playing very well until Watford did Watford things and just got rid of him, and almost kept that awful whole team up. Genuinely a rubbish team, and he almost kept them up. And before that, his experience in Europe, he has had one of the most impressive league campaigns in Greece as Olympiakos manager. So I think he's a good manager with good pedigree. He's young enough. He fits the profile. He's obviously willing to commit to a club for length of time, like Fulham. He plays a nice brand of football, and I think he'd be someone we should really be looking at as West Ham fans. The only reason I don't have him slightly higher is because of his less than stellar time sort of towards the end of Watford and the second season he had at Everton. But those are really sort of minor criticisms of him. In at 7 we have Thomas Frank. And now Thomas Frank, I think, has done an exceptional job at Brentford. He's been there for 4 or 5 years, and he's taken them from a mid-table championship team to a mid-table Premier League team, looking at another season in the Premier League next year. Obviously, he's massively helped by the recruitment around Brentford, but he's tactically very sound, can get fast counter-attacks, structured attacks, but also maintain a strong defensive solidity. He's done well in sort of an injury-ridden season to sort of bring the club to safety. The only criticisms I'd have are he's got a long contract. If he didn't have a contract until I've got written down in 2027, he'd be much higher up on my list of priorities. And the football can be boring at times, which I know has been a major criticism of David Moyes. They want someone younger, more exciting football. So I think maybe that's a slight issue, and obviously concerns whether his football can make the step up to sort of competing for Europe, because it's obviously made the step up from the Championship to the Premier League. Just got to see whether it can make the next sort of step up into sort of the challenging for Europe echelons of the Premier League. 6th, and this one is extremely ambitious, but I have gone with Hansi Flick. Hansi Flick was the former manager at Bayern Munich and Germany, and the job he did at Bayern Munich was incredible. Won every trophy there was to win. Premier League, Champions League, DFB Pokal, Super Cup, all of those. The only reason he's not won is because the job he did as Germany manager was extremely poor, crashing out the groups at the World Cup, round of 16 at the Euros. For a country as big and as decorated as Germany, he has to be doing better than that. Okay, now on to the top 5. These are the 5 managers. I would say from about 6 to probably 18 were managers I would consider having at West Ham. 19 to about 23 were managers I wouldn't want at West Ham, but I wouldn't complain about. Anything below 23 were managers I didn't particularly want. These top 5 are all names I would actively like to replace David Moyes. Starting off at number 5 is Seb Hoeneß. I think I've said that right. He's a 41-year-old manager at Stuttgart currently, who he has in the Champions League places after saving them from relegation last season. I think he's a very impressive coach, very tactically good. He's also had experience at top level leagues before Stuttgart. It's not a one-off. He managed, who was it, Hoffenheim to 2 solid but slightly uninspiring mid-table seasons, which is why I think they got rid of him. And he obviously won the German third league with the Bayern Munich second team. I think he's a very capable coach, and the only reason, and he's well within being the top 5, the only reason he probably isn't any higher considering the season he's having is his contract is until 2027, which means it would cost a lot to bring him in, and he doesn't have any experience managing Europe yet, which I would or the Premier League, which I consider somewhat important. Now, number 4, just above him, I would have Graham Potter. Now, if at West Ham we're looking for a project, I don't think we can look any further than Graham Potter. In Sweden, with Östersund, he did a very impressive job bringing them from the third league to the first league, winning them a cup, and then giving them a European journey to remember. Extremely impressive. Then he came to Swansea, had a good season at Swansea. Then was at Brighton for 3 and a bit seasons, where he bought them from Chris Hughton, who obviously did a great job of bringing them up. But he bought them from Chris Hughton, sort of defensive, solid, very boring football that's just escaping relegation, to a nice possession-based, easy on the eye football that brought them up to 8th and sort of laid the foundation for something like De Zerbi to really kick on with them that season. And I think we're seeing now that De Zerbi hasn't necessarily improved what Potter left. It's why they're still between the 6th to 10th spot, which I really think is a testament to how well Potter especially set up the defence. It's obviously a name I'd love, free agent as well. The one main criticism of him, which is why he isn't sort of first, is his time at Chelsea was a total disaster, from start to finish. Not a great look for him, I'll be honest. But I think for a project manager, if he's going to have less influence on the transfers, and he's just going to be about coaching the players to play the best football possible, I don't think you can look any further than someone like Graham Potter. I know it's a bit controversial with some of the names I mentioned, but I think he ticks the boxes. European experience, Premier League experience, worked in a project before. I know he's not a lot of West Ham's first choice, plays good football, but I really think he's a name we should be considering. At number 3, we have Paulo Fonseca. Now there's a little clip going around on Twitter about how Paulo Fonseca likes to sort of bring through the youth at West Ham, which is something I think as a lot of West Ham fans would be very excited to do, because it hasn't happened with Moyes a lot. He's 51 and he's done a decent job wherever he's been, and he's been at a lot of clubs: Lille, Braga, Shakhtar Donetsk and Roma are the main ones. Had decent experience in Europe with Shakhtar Donetsk and Lille. Just narrowly this week going out of the Conference League to Villa, where if you watch that game, he outplayed Villa for long periods of that game. Obviously trust the youth. He's in, especially at Lille, he's brought in through names like Lenny Yoro, Thiago Santos, and if you don't know those names now, if they carry on their current trajectory, you'll know them very soon. And he's also available on a free transfer this summer, and I think he's really a name we should be looking at, sort of really going for. I think he'd be open to a move to the Premier League, and I think at only 51, he could possibly stay here for 3, 4, 5 years if things work out. That's something I'd be really interested in. Now, at number 2, I have Arne Slot, who is currently the Feyenoord manager. Let me just find my notes on him. 45, he's won a league title and a KNVB Becker trophy at Feyenoord. Been there for 3 seasons now. Plays some lovely football, been courted by a lot of the bigger clubs. There's been some rumours about Liverpool. Tottenham and Chelsea have been extremely interested in him in the past. He's not a free agent, and it would obviously take a lot of sort of funds to get him in, but he does play very nice football, brings players through nicely, has a decent record in Europe, has a very good record in the league, and sort of propelled Feyenoord from where they were sort of the 3rd, 4th, 5th team in the Dutch league to second, first, sort of right up there competing. The hardest thing about him would be getting him out of his contract. He publicly stated he'd stay another season and final last season. He's obviously very enamoured with the club, so it would be very tough to get him in, if that makes sense. And then at number one, the name we most recently been linked with, and as of right now, seems very unlikely, is Ruben Amorim, on track for his second league title with Sporting Lisbon. A very impressive coach. He plays sort of a somewhat revolutionary 3-4-2-1 formation, like sort of like a Christmas tree, if that makes sense. With high and wide wing backs, sort of two tens that sort of, or two very narrow wingers, which I think someone like Bowen, Paqueta could do, and then a striker up top. I think he's a very exciting coach. He's obviously been looked at by some of the biggest clubs in Europe. If you watched his Lisbon team against Arsenal, I think in the 22-23 season, in the European quarterfinals, played extremely well. He's developed players extremely well. Someone like Gyökeres, currently Gonçalves, Pedro Porro, who's at Tottenham, someone like Diamonde, who they're looking to sort of sell and raise some funds for. And he's a very impressive manager. The only thing is, he's so tough to get. He's so ambitious. If we could get him, it's a real statement of intent to show them we're West Ham. We're sort of here, if that makes sense. But again, it's like I said, he might be a bit of a long shot. But like, as I said, anyone sort of within the top 10 names I've mentioned, I'd be happy to place Moyes with. Sort of 11, because I'll include McKenna as well. So 12 to about 23. I'd may prefer to keep Moyes, but I'd be willing to hear the arguments. Anyone below 23, if we sat Moyes for Steve Cooper, or we let Moyes walk for Steve Cooper, sorry, we're not sacking him, or Jesse Marsh or Harry Gracia, I'm going to have serious questions about the board. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, and I'll probably be doing a video on potential West Ham summer signings later. Thank you. Bye.